You know, little things mean a lot. Had my sister Vanny not taken my mom to the photo studio and have this picture made, I would not have had this beautiful photograph of my mother. Thank you, Vanny. Little things mean a lot. Speaking about mom, I would love to tell you more about her. I lived with my mother from birth until I was around, I think, 5 or 6 years old. And then I lived with her again when I was around 19 years old for a few years in West Medford, Massachusetts. And in the time period that I lived with her and got to know her, I had a lot of respect and love for my mother. Now, you may say, well, isn't that natural that one should love and respect their mother and their father? But that's not necessarily true. I could have easily disrespect her and not love her at all. See, I'm sharing this with you only because I know that in families all over the world, relatives are interfering with marriages. Relatives are interfering with marriages. The marriage between my mother and father, it only lasted for so long, and it was broken up. And one of the reasons I believe that happened was because of the interference of relatives, one in particular. But let's stay positive. I'm fortunate to have had a beautiful father and a beautiful mother. And my mother is, of course, she had parents. Her mother, Maud Walcott, my grandmother, was an adventurer. She went on a steamship from Jamaica to Costa Rica. Imagine in the 1800s or the early 1900s, a woman traveling on a steamship off from Jamaica to Costa Rica. There she met her husband, Thomas Walcott. Now, I don't remember anything at all about my mother's father, Thomas Walcott, except for what my father tells me, for what my father told me about Thomas Walcott. He said, Thomas Walcott was without a doubt one of the most spiritual men he has ever met. Now, my father is a very, very good judge of character. And the reason for that is because he's a very sensitive person, and relatives have said an awful lot of ugly, really ugly things about him. They have. And I know who they are. And yet it just rolled off his back. So he's a very sensitive person, but he's not a stupid man. He's a highly spiritual man and a highly intelligent man. So when he told me about my grandfather, Thomas Walcott, I listened carefully. He said Thomas Walcott, as I said, was a highly spiritual man, but he was also a very kind and very silent man. He took a lot of abuse. He just let it roll off his back. Anyway, so my grandmother went to Costa Rica. They got married, and all her children were born in Costa Rica. Apparently, they had a farm in Costa Rica. From what I have been able to gather, is about 200 acres, and that's a pretty big farm back then. But they all came up in hard times, extremely hard times. So my grandmother packed her children and took them all to Jamaica. Now remember, they were Costa Rican going back to Jamaica. So they were not Jamaican citizens, they were Costa Rican citizens. My Uncle John, for example, he joined the Royal Air Force because in doing that, then he could get a passage to becoming a Jamaican citizen. The other uncles, Uncle Tom, Uncle Doran, Uncle Ernest, these uncles, they applied for Jamaican citizens and they were Jamaicans. Now, about my mother, let's get back to her for a minute. My mother was very, very, very smart, highly intelligent woman. She's also a highly religious person. Now, I'm not a religious person, but she was. But she had this great habit. You'd ask her a question, and rather than giving you an answer, she said you should do your own research. Find out for yourself. So, in our home in West Medford, Massachusetts, we had a massive library. I would guess that it was probably the largest home library in West Medford, Massachusetts. So when she said, go and do your own research, she didn't mean for us to go to a library, because we had just about every book, every encyclopedia, all the classics, from Homer's Iliad to all the plays of Shakespeare, right in our own home. So whatever I asked her, I would go and look it up, find out for myself. Now, as I said, she was a very religious person, a very smart woman, a very beautiful woman. She always kept her hair in a natural way, and she always was in search of truth. Her path was through religion. I can't fault her for that, because that was her path. Anyway, that was what Elsa Thompson was all about. She later got married, after the divorce from my dad, by the way, because of the interference I told you about earlier. She got married again, and she became Elsa Thompson. There's something I want to tell you about my mother. When she moved to Mandeville, she opened a shirt factory. That's right. You were not a gentleman unless you wore Elsa's shirts. And she produced shirts for such notable stores like Hanna's or Issa's, those sort of stores. And this was back in the 50s, 1950s. So she was also a highly industrial person, very much into, you got it, being creative. So that is what I remember about my mother. Now, I'm making these little videos not so much as record keeping, because I want my great-great-grandchildren to see these people as human beings. So there you have it. My undying love and respect for my mother, Elsa.